Everybody, it is Mike, a digitalnomad.net. Is chivalry dead? That's the question here. Women and children first. What does all this mean over here in 2025? Let's listen to Dad Mode in Dark Mode explain the situation for us.
So we've all heard the phrase, women and children first.
Mm-hmm.
It's drilled into us like it's the most noble thing that a man can do, right? A moral law, an instinct that we're supposed to just obey without question. You don't stop to ask if it's fair. You don't stop to ask if it's
All right, now remember, this is chivalry we're talking about here. This is something that was drilled into my head, born in 1970. I'm 55 years young right now. And back then, women and men weren't equal. Women were just becoming liberalized, I guess, back then. And a lot has happened since then. Now, men are exiting the dating markets. Women are still hypergamous. Their standards are all the sixes, 6 feet plus, six-pack ads, six-figure income, which is more like 250,000 these days. And men don't want to deal with it anymore, especially with the proliferation of the internet and everybody seeing everything else and feeling depressed about their lives and wanting everything. Does chivalry even apply anymore? I mean, even when I was younger, I was thinking, hey, all women want to have careers. Why are men paying for dates? Why are men doing all this stuff? Why do men have to propose? And I know back in the 90s or the 80s or the early 2000s, that was still hanging on, but I think it's all gone now. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And by the way, this video is down there in the comments if you want to watch it.
It's logical. You just step aside. You give up your seat. Or in some cases, you give up your life, right? But here's the thing, that rule isn't about fairness, and it isn't about morality. It isn't even about survival of the group. It's about
True. It's all these things he's talking about here. I'm going to make some adjustments here to the screen while we're going. And unfortunately, because of this, men are second-class citizens. Men are viewed as disposable. And back in the day, I'd say there was no other way to handle things, I would think. I mean, you just kind of had to do things like that. Am I adjusting this? Whoop, there we go. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it right or not. But men just had to do things like that. There we go. Now we're bigger. Because women weren't equal. They didn't have equal opportunity. But now we're seeing that women have equal opportunity. They even have more opportunity for the most part. And they're still expecting men to be disposable. And is this okay in 2025? I don't think so.
About male disposability. It's about the silent agreement that a man's value is in how much of himself he can give up so that others, women, and yes, children, can live.
Okay, that's like the social contract. It's like there's a social contract for working. We all have these things that we have to kind of abide by, even though we didn't agree to any of them before we were born. But that social contract is changing, just like the women and children first in the lifeboats or down a burning building. I don't think that's the case anymore, or at least in my opinion, it's only the case if you have a woman that is not expecting, I don't know. I don't even know what the words are. Somebody can help with that in the comment. But, a lot of American guys are being passport bros because women in other countries are looking for be more of a trad wife. If you're going to be more of a trad wife, traditional wife, or traditional relationship, traditional girlfriend, then maybe if that's how the person is, if that's how you're doing, then it's to be expected. But I would say something like this privilege or right of women and children first, that, especially the women part, that's on a case-by-case basis, in my opinion.
And if you've paid attention to how things really work between men and women, this isn't a lifeboat policy. It's right. A life strategy. It's not a chivalrous impulse. It's more of a cultural reflex that benefits one side while conditioning the other to disappear without protest.
And I guess you could take that into the divorce realm too. Since 80% plus of divorces are initiated by women and most of the stuff is in favor of women. I'm speaking specifically if there are children involved, because when does the guy ever get primary custody? Like never, it seems like. Even though if things are equal, it should be 50-50. The custody should be split half. Half the time it maybe should go to the woman, half to the men, or should be 50-50 all around, which I would like even better.
And so today, I want to break down why men and children first would make way more sense in
So he's going the other
2025.
way. Okay.
And why
Let's see what he
modern
had to say.
women, for all their qualities, are not lifeboat material.
Okay. When he says modern women, he's saying a westernized United States woman. I think that everybody kind of agrees that the U.S. traditional setup, or at least the American dream setup, kind of peaked in the 1950s. So women don't necessarily expect that anymore. The average woman is a way more liberal these days. The average man is becoming way more conservative. So I would say that in terms of how the average person in the U.S. is viewed, it should be more of a 50-50. And women and children first does not put, and the chivalry does not account for 50-50. That's what I always knew was going to have to change. And it seems like right now we're right in the middle of that.
And I'm not saying that to be an edgelord. Okay, this isn't about hating women. This is about stripping away the illusion that they're automatic, selfless protectors of anyone but themselves.
Right. Okay. So he's saying don't assume. Don't assume that they are automatic selfless protectors. Don't assume that they are not equal to men, because the chivalry code assumes that they are. And you know what happens when you assume? You make an ass out of you and me. It's never a good idea to assume about anything. And this is a hot button issue right now that I would say, I agree. You should never make that assumption in 2025.
And their children. It's about survival instincts, theirs and ours. And so just going way back to the origins of the women and children first code.
Here we go.
I mean, it didn't come out of thin air. It came from Victorian ideals.
There you go. Yep.
An age where men were expected to go to war and expected to work themselves into an early.
Yeah, that's the thing. Men are still expected to go to war. Men are still required to sign up for the draft. Until women are required to do that, does that mean we keep this code, or does that mean the code doesn't apply because they're equal in every other area except this? I mean, take, for instance, back in the day when this chivalrous code was developed, there was no freezing your eggs as a woman. There was no freezing your sperm banks. There was no alternative ways of pregnancy or conceiving children. And a lot of this, I think, was developed in order to allow the human race to survive. And we're in a thrive mode now, I'd say, not a survival mode anymore.
Early grave. And if necessary, die in a shipwreck so that milady could make it to shore, right? And then, of course, there's the Titanic mythology, which has been, locked into our cultural imagination.
I'd say another part of this is that, it was tragic if a man died and the women and children survived. Who would take care of them? I think society back in the day, correct me if I'm wrong, they kind of made sure that people were taken care of. Right now, there's government programs. It's all paid for in your taxes. You're paying for it regardless at this point in time.
The stories of men tipping their hats, stepping back, and just calmly accepting death while women and children boarded lifeboats.
So glad I did not exist during those times.
Society ate that up. Nom, nom, nom. It wasn't just, considered brave. It was considered manly.
Gonna man up.
And that's the root of the problem.
I'd say man up is, even though a lot of people would say it applies to this that he's discussing, it really just applies to being a man, and taking initiative, having agency, because in the past, only men had agency. Now women and children, there's children TikTokers, they have agency. They can create amazing things now, whereas in the past, they couldn't create these things. Does this make sense?
we created a social value system where manliness equals sacrifice, especially for women, and where, refusing that role makes you defective. And that script got passed down through, history books and movies and parenting and then
Yeah, so you had a very narrow role to fill. It wasn't a whole lot of variety there. And that's where this tradition of women and children first originates.
little side comments about, what real men do. And chivalry over time morphed into unquestioned sacrifice. We still live under that spell today.
So part of that unquestioned sacrifice is like holding doors, paying for dates, paying for everything potentially. And it's weird because we're in this spot where women are still hypergamous, so they want a man that's even more capable of all these things than they are, and they're finding it hard to find. I don't think he's going to touch on that in this video, but that's another part of this dynamic.
Men are, expected to be the last in line for safety and the last in line for comfort.
Now, keep in mind, I would say it doesn't take away from being kind and being nice and being generous. These things are totally separate from this code of chivalry and women and children first, in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments.
And consideration. Not because they're less valuable, but because they've been trained to believe that giving it all away is what makes them valuable. I mean,
Well, if that's the case,
I grew up believing that
giving it all away makes them valuable. I mean, that would mean that there wasn't really any point in a man being alive other than his potential deadly sacrifice for a woman and children. And I don't view that as anything that someone should aspire to. I think that men have a very good influence when it comes to like habits and discipline, for instance. I think much more so than women in general. I'm saying in general. And I think that, a positive male influence is maybe the new version of this lifeboat material, the new version of women and children first, is that a positive male influence in the lives of children and mothers is beneficial for all of society. That's how it is in 2025. And unfortunately, that women and children often don't see it that way. The children are trained by the women for the most part. I'm not trying to say anything against women. I'm trying to say that men have things against them because of the way it is today. Even if overall the equation was more balanced in the past, right now it is unbalanced, especially when it comes to child raising and the recognition of a positive male role model. I'd say in many cases, what happens is that the women or the children don't say, "Oh, a positive male role model is bad." They just say, "Oh, well, the one I have is too particular about this, too strict about that, etc., which means they don't value it because generally women are going to be less strict, less concerned about discipline. Do you know what I'm saying? Let me know what you think in the comments.
At the measure of a man was, how much he could give up for the women in his life, right? And I saw men, good men, lose their health, their freedom, their kids, and they called it love. I called it normal until I lived it. I mean, long before dating apps and no-fault divorce or social media, Instagram, all that stuff, Schopenhauer, he saw something that most men don't even figure out until after they've been burned.
Which is?
I was one of those men. I didn't figure all this out until after I got burned.
But actually, a lot of people have been burned. I would say I'm probably included in that as well. And a lot of it is because we simply didn't go over the fine details of what a U.S. state-controlled marriage relationship is. And we also didn't value the relationship enough, thinking that if it doesn't work out, somehow everything's going to be just fine. But it's not. And this is one of the reasons why marriage rates are way down. So much of this, the equation has changed over time and it needs to be rebalanced. And that's kind of where we are right now in 2025.
But yeah, he saw that women, as a rule, are survival driven first. Affection is conditional. And emotional influence it's far more.
Right. Actually, I kind of agree with that too. You kind of see it's not all women are like this, but some women, they'll treat you a certain way while you're dating. You probably heard this, like Andrew Dice Clay routine or whatever. Okay. But then it changes when you have kids. All of a sudden, this focus on survival he's talking about, that's directed towards hyper focus on the kids, and the man, the father, the genetic father, that attention is pulled away from him. Not to say that it should be this way, maybe in the past when this chivalry was required, but not anymore. But because of that, the whole dynamic and equation is screwed up.
Potent of a weapon than physical strength. And he wasn't talking about good or evil. He was talking about nature. And then, of course, in modern terms, we call it hypergamy. You know, it's the better deal instinct.
Always looking for a better deal. Some people say it's greed. Hypergamy is greed.
Built-in programming that says, you know, if there's a man who offers me more security, more resources.
Oh, and by the way, if you don't believe this, or this is the first time you're hearing it, check out some other videos here on this digitalnomad.net channel about hypergamy. It's definitely a thing, and it's definitely a factor. It always has been, and that has not gone away. That's the thing. That has not gone away, yet it seems like people are still expecting this chivalry to stay. It doesn't make any sense.
More status than, you know, I owe it to myself and my children to choose him. And, you know, in 2025, I mean, this instinct is, you know, it's supercharged by the attention economy that we live in. The Instagram feed, the endless DMs, you know, dating apps where, you know, a better option is just a swipe away.
Yep.
That's why, you know, loyalty feels like it erodes so quickly.
Yeah.
Because in an environment with infinite options, commitment isn't about love. It's not. It's about opportunity cost.
I suppose you could look at it that way, but commitment is also about a give and take, a relationship, an equally balanced, mutually beneficial friendship, relationship, however you want to look at it, where both parties are benefiting and you're doing more than you could do on your own. That's when it's good. And it's harder and harder to find that these days, that's for sure.
And for me, it wasn't about someone trading up to a better option. It was about realizing that the commitment that I thought was there was never built on the same foundation that I believed that it was.
This guy also may have experienced what I said earlier about how he has a kid with this girl, with this woman, and they're not together anymore, I believe, from what I've seen on this channel. Again, the video link is down below. But I think he probably experienced what I'm talking about, which is all the attention was focused on him until the kid, and then all the woman's attention was focused on the kid, or most all of it, to the detriment of the relationship between him and her. And then, you know, there's no gauge for that. Let's put it that way. If you've never had kids, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. If you have, please chime in here and let me know in the comments.
Conditions shifted. The loyalty wasn't about the bond. It was about what could be gained. It was transactional. And that's when I realized.
Well, I would also say that probably all relationships are transactional, not just in the United States, but everywhere, meaning it needs to be mutually beneficial. And if things change to whether or not, that's what he's describing, I think it happened after the child was born, well, that's bad. It needs to remain paramount. The relationship between the father and the mother, where there's kids involved, because obviously there's kids involved here, needs to be the number one relationship. And there needs to be a mutually beneficial arrangement there. If there's not, then there's going to be problems, regardless of what the law says, in my opinion.
For her, loyalty was a lease, not a deed. And we like to tell ourselves stories.
Again, what he's saying sounds like loyalty was a lease, not a deed, that he or she had that together. Then the child was born. I'm just reading in between the lines here. Let me know what you think. But this is reality, okay? A lot of people are like this. Not everyone's like this, or maybe all women are like this. I don't know. I'm not a woman. I don't think every woman is like this, but let me know in the comments.
Stories about the selfless, nurturing woman who would do anything for her man. But biology speaks differently than that. Women protect themselves and their children first, always.
I don't agree with that. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments. What I think is that if a woman chooses to do that, then yes. But we live in an age where you don't need traditional sex to have kids anymore. You can get a sperm and an egg done to a surrogate or whatever else other combination you want. So it may not even be yours biologically. If he's speaking biologically only, then maybe he has a point, although I still don't agree. I think that if the man and the woman, they get married or they have some kind of contract between them that's mutually beneficial, that's not necessarily a marriage in a U.S. state, then that should be abided by. That's what I think. And I think it can be. I don't think it's all or nothing here.
The partner comes after, if at all.
Okay, that's what he's saying. And by the way, I have been in other relationships. Just so you know, I was married once before for almost 20 years. Had a few kids, and I did experience a lot of what he's saying for various reasons. Every situation is different. Then I got involved in a long-term relationship with somebody else that had kids, and I said right up front, because I realized this in the previous marriage, I said, if I'm going to be in a relationship, I need to be number one. You and me need to be number one. Even if there's already kids, you and me need to be number one. Even if we have kids of our own, you and me need to be number one. And I was very clear on that. And I was told that, yes, I can do that. But as the years went on, it became apparent that that wasn't going to happen. So I may be agreeing with this guy right here. I don't know, but I still am an optimist. I still think it can happen. It's just that you have to be very intentional and focused on that.
You see this play out when you look at divorce statistics, right? Women initiating most separations, and then in custody disputes, when push comes to shove, partnership turns into a zero-sum game. And I know I've lived it in my own custody battle. The idea of partnership disappeared the second that it stopped serving her interests.
That's his view. A relationship is a two-way street. So I'd say that both of them kind of went off their own separate way, which is unfortunate. But like I said, I told you, I got involved in another relationship which ended, where I said, you and me, we have to be number one. Even if there's siblings, kids, offspring involved, they're second. But towards the end, I think what I was told was, there's enough love to go around for everyone. Meaning, that's not an agreement anymore. And I kind of put my finger on that, and I recognized the change. And at that point, I had a decision to make, and I made my decision to end that relationship. Now, in his situation, I don't know if that was ever talked about. And this is something that people should be talking about now.
My ex, who I was never married to, thank God.
Okay, there you go.
Acted with intent and in ways that were absolutely malicious.
Okay, that's what he says, but they were never married. So they didn't have that type of a contract or an agreement. I wonder if they had any written agreement. Actually, that's what I would advise. I would advise, if you're going to get in a long-term relationship, even if you don't get legally married through a U.S. state, have it in writing. That would be best, because you'd be able to tell if someone's fulfilling that initial agreement or not, or you'd be able to modify it later on.
And Machiavellian. And the system rewarded her behavior every single step of the way. Still does to this day.
Well, that again,
And
that's because of that's what happens with U.S. law right now because women and children need to be protected, apparently, when there is a separation from the biological father. And there are some other roots in this. Some people say, oh, well, if you look at certain animals, they need the male needs to be kept away because he'll he'll kill the offspring. We're not animals. We're humans. Okay. So I don't agree with that unless somebody has extenuating circumstances which need to be addressed. But for the most part, any little tiny thing is viewed as toxic male aggression of any kind. Okay. And that's a problem. It's always used against men, and it's used no matter what. Even if there wasn't there, the women would still probably get custody, marriage or no marriage, and the guy would have to pay money and see his kids less than ever. Does that sound fair? Does that sound like a good deal to you as a guy?
when the system automatically sided with her, it wasn't a question of
Yeah, there you
if
go.
she'd use it, it was when. And of course she did. And it's not
When he says use it, I wonder what he's saying, what he means by that.
just a personal story, it's a broader reality. The structure itself encourages and incentivizes this kind of behavior.
Well, what it does is the default that's out there right now, like I said, if it's a guy and a girl, because it could be two girls, it could be two guys, but if there's a guy and a girl who did a baby the traditional way, okay, not from a sperm bank or frozen eggs or a surrogate mother, they almost always give the woman custody, and the man has to pay money to see his kid less. Okay, that's what he's talking about. Keep that in mind because that is not okay. I'm not okay with that anymore. In the past, when men their only existence was to go to war or to leave the house to earn money, I could see that. I mean, what else are you going to do? But we don't live in that world anymore.
I mean, women, biologically speaking, they can't outmuscle a man. They just can't. So she's learned to outmaneuver him emotionally. That is covert power. Influence without confrontation.
Okay, she learns to outmaneuver him emotionally, but leveraging U.S. law. Okay, keep that in mind. U.S. states' laws. Usually, it's depending upon the state. But who wouldn't learn that? I don't say it's a male or a woman thing. That's just the way it's going to go. Let's treat everyone equally here. I mean, yes, you could say that a woman's more emotional, a man's more logical, but this is the simple thing of a custody settlement, custody agreement. That's what he's talking about here.
And it works. And some examples of that are, the silent treatment that you get, guilt tripping, reputation damage, shaming.
Okay, well, what he's talking about there is a real thing. Silent treatment only really applies if you're in a relationship or if you're trying to co-parent and the person is not responsive. But yeah, your own reputation damage is a severe thing because that's the thing. You broke up because you didn't get along. Do you really think that that other parent is singing your praises? The one that has the children the most? The answer is no. So, of course, they're going to grow up thinking that you are the worst of the two options. And that's not a good thing. It should be equal because the same thing will be true with him. I'm sure in the time he spends with his child, unfortunately, but he just spends a very little amount of time, and because of that, unless he's right there with the friends, the children are going to want to stay with their friends as well. Although I don't know how important that is on 2025 since everybody's online, but that's also worked and used against the guy.
In public, social exclusion. I mean, I've been in conversations where I thought I was, hashing things out, like adults, but in reality, I was the only one that was operating on logic. She was operating on leverage.
Logic, emotion, whatever. That's just the difference between men and women. as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, one party has advantage because they have the law to facilitate uh, extracting what they want. That's the problem here.
Using emotion and tone and selective withdrawal to get what she wanted without ever calling it a negotiation. It's adaptation. And the men who don't
Okay, he's really gone off a tangent here. I'm sure he's got some personal issues he's still dealing with. I'm sure I do too. Although I've learned a ton of lessons from my experience, and he's kind of got off the women and children first, if you ask me.
recognize it are the ones who end up apologizing for things that they didn't even do wrong. Just to, get the emotional temperature back down.
Yeah, he's way off here.
Men have always been the default sacrifice in, you see it in war and work and disasters. That's the legacy of women and children first. Today, the sacrifice looks different, but it's still there. Men.
Okay, so that maybe what he's saying, to bring it all together, is that men shouldn't be sacrificed in this equation, in this raising of the next generation. And I would agree with that. But what he's saying mostly applies to situations that have children involved, I'd say. And that's, of course, when emotions are running the most high, too.
Men are the first to lose their kids in family court. They're the ones who work the longest hours and take the most dangerous jobs and die younger. They burn out.
Okay, men also don't take care of themselves. So you want to know why they die younger? The average man thinks it's not even manly to take care of yourself, unfortunately. Hopefully that'll change.
And society calls it providing. So let's do a thought experiment. What if we actually said men and children first? More fathers alive and involved in their kids' lives. Less financial ruin after custody battles. Boys growing up with strong male role models.
I'd say perfect. But the thing is, you can't, when the relationship breaks up, it's because two people didn't learn how to get along. And maybe they're not right for each other. I don't know. But it should be 50-50. Nobody should be first. There should be value in everyone that wants to participate. And like I said, it shouldn't be, the deck shouldn't be stacked against men who are fathers. It shouldn't be, but it is. It continues to be to this day.
Instead of being raised in fatherless homes.
Oh, and by the way, it's even more important for girls to have a positive male role model. Just want to mention that.
You've probably seen the statistics, the outcomes with single fathers. The ripple effects would be massive and very positive. Up to this point, everything I've said has been about recognizing the problem. The cultural script, the instincts, the system that takes from men without hesitation. But recognition alone isn't enough. If you see the iceberg and you're still standing on deck, just waiting for someone else to act, you're still going down with the ship, dude. This is where action matters. If you don't want to be the lifeboat, the thing that saves everyone else at the expense of yourself, you have to make deliberate changes in how you live and how you think and in how you engage with people.
So I'm curious what he thinks those are.
Step one is awareness. And that means actually seeing these instincts and patterns when they happen. And most men miss them because they've been taught and conditioned to give the benefit of the doubt until they're in ruins.
Okay, that may be true for some, but of course you can always learn. That's why the importance is for lifelong learning, and so many people are done with learning the minute they get out of school. It's too bad. Oh, but by the way, this guy has learned because pain is the best teacher. It's the most painful. It's the most difficult. It's the worst teacher, but it's also the most effective teacher, unfortunately.
And awareness isn't about becoming bitter or paranoid. It's just about, removing the blindfold so that you can
Yeah,
stop walking into the same trap over and
definitely.
over again. That's it. Step 2 is detachment. And that doesn't mean that you just stop caring about anyone. That's not what that means. It means you stop letting your sense of worth hinge on whether someone approves of you or loves you or rewards you in any way. Detachment is the ability to stay steady even when someone else is trying to pull you into their storm.
I would say that traditional men have always been accused that they're too detached. What do you think about that? Let me know in the comments. And I would say that it's more the feminized men that are too attached and can't let go. That's kind of what's happened today, if you ask me. So you can't let go of something, and especially if you're raising kids, you can't let go because you were taught that. And then you have to let go. You're forced to lose most of your time with your children and a lot of your money too.
And then step 3 is boundaries. I mean, if you can't say no, then you will always be someone else's safety net and doormat. And they
Always,
will
yeah.
feel
Good boundaries are always important.
entitled to use you. A man without boundaries is a man without leverage. Boundaries aren't walls to keep everyone out. They're just lines that define what's yours to give and what's off limits. And then step 4 is self-mastery.
So the boundaries always important for good quality relationships. It's almost never discussed with romantic relationships, but it needs to be, and I think it will be now moving forward. And yes, self-mastery for sure. You need to not wait and find all this stuff out too late. But like I said, most people, they don't learn much of anything after they leave school and stop reading books. And I would say you shouldn't do that. Don't do that. Don't wait till the most painful of teachers is going to come your way.
Build a life that doesn't require female validation to feel complete. When your time and your energy and your full focus and attention is directed towards your own mission, your own fitness, your own financial independence, and your own personal code, everything shifts and changes.
Yeah, and you need to work on that before you have kids. It's a lot harder to do it after you're trying to raise kids, although this guy seems like he has.
The moment you stop needing that outside validation, your entire dynamic with women changes. And so does.
Yeah, because people always want what they can't have, especially women. That's another thing. I don't think he says those words, but that's what's at play here, what he's talking about.
Is your dynamic with yourself. And in closing, the moment that you stop seeing yourself as disposable is the moment that you stop living like you're waiting for permission to survive.
Okay, so he's saying that chivalry and women and children first is men as disposable. And that's the opposite of having value. So I would agree with that. If that's what's really going on, let me know your thoughts in the comments.
You stop standing at the edge, just waiting to be pushed overboard. You step into the reality that no one is coming to save you, and you don't need them to.
Okay, no one's coming to save you. Let's end on that note. Again, the video is linked below. Let me know your thoughts. This is a very complex situation, but like I said, I've seen it. I've felt this for decades now that this was going to have to go away. And maybe now that most men, like in their 20s, and other men too, have either abandoned the dating market or become passport bros or just sworn off women altogether, and they'll have an AI or robotic girlfriend. I think that there's leverage now to change this, and I think it's going to change fast. So I'll be interested to read your comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.